Recorder. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا بني آدم قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم وريشا ولباس التقوى ذلك خير ذلك من آيات الله لعلهم يتذكرون يا بني آدم لا يفتننكم الشيطان كما أخرج أبويكم من الجنة ينزع عنهما لباسهما ليريهما سوآتهما إنه يراكم هو وقبيله من حيث لا ترونهم إنا جعلنا الشياطين أولياء للذين لا يؤمنون صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. The verses of the Quran that are recited from chapter 7 I interpret as follows. O generations of Adam, we have provided you with outfits to conceal your nakedness and for adornment. But the outfit that enhances divine attributes, that is the most attractive. These are tips from Allah for them to pay attention. O generation of Adam, don't allow a negative attraction consume you somewhat like what pushed you out of your two foreparents from a state of happiness, tearing from them both their outfits to expose their nakedness. It and its figurehead indeed stalks you from where you don't notice them. We place these negative attractions as indicators to those who have no self-confidence. I bear witness that without Allah there is no God. I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last, the final messenger of Allah, after whom no prophet old or new will come. And I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. The world today experiences tremendous amount of environmental effects. In some parts of the world, the northern part, there are extreme coolness, and in other parts there's extreme dryness, even bringing about fires at some places where multimillionaires have built their homes. It is completely wiped out, entire village towns, cities perhaps, and even appearing even worse than some of the battles we see in Ukraine and in Gaza and in other parts of the world, in Yemen. And in other parts of the world where there is no cold, there is extreme heat. And there are variations of weather, hurricanes as well as heavy thunderstorms and flooding. But in all of this, we would realize that it is only the human beings, or human beings are the only creatures that need outfits, that need garments, that need clothing, that need something to protect them from that extreme weather or even under normal conditions, normal weather. So that in some places where it is extremely cold, even heat in a house or building cannot give people comfort. They still have to wear layers and layers of clothing. And under normal circumstances, when the weather is good, we will find that much of the world, in so many parts of the world, human beings spend a lot on clothing of the body. So much so that a fashion industry has been developed, and as we know, most people tend to shop for some kind of clothing for any event. And that is important for us to clothe ourselves properly. But we will find that less is spent on garments or outfits for the soul, for the spiritual self. And human beings, in many cases, are living in what we'll call a spiritual nudist camp. They have no concern of their personality and character. The Quran teaches us in these verses that I've recited that both of these things are necessary. We need outfits, we need different kinds of clothing, not only clothing, accessories. If it's bad weather or hot weather, you need an umbrella, you will need a hat, you need a mask if there's some kind of flu or virus around. Not only the clothing we clothe our body with, but the outfit that we may need, the type of weather may need shoes, you may need stockings or whatever it may be. So the Quran points out to us that while both of these things are necessary, the outfit for our bodies and the outfit for our clothes, the outfit that enhances divine attributes, and the expression used here is libasul taqwa. Libas meaning an outfit, a garment, a clothing, dress. The dress, the garment, the outfit that leads to taqwa. And taqwa means protecting yourself from any and everything that prevents divine qualities from being developed within yourself, in your soul, because that's the purpose of life. Our soul is the only part of our self that we can develop divine attributes of love, kindness, justice, charity, mercy, and I've been saying this for so many times. That is the purpose of Allah giving us a soul. He gives the human beings the opportunity in order to develop ourselves. People tend to think that God has created human beings here on earth. He'll create mischief, they'll kill each other, they'll live as they well want, and then He will wait until the day of judgment and then pass judgment, forgive some, punish some, and in some cases they think it's eternity. And most religions tend to promote that kind of concept and idea. The Quran does not give us this kind of interpretation. It gives us guidance as to how to live a good life, but tells us the consequences of following or not following that guidance and what effect it will have upon us. So much so that even in these verses the Quran says Allah has given us a tip, He's given us a hint. The word ayat in the Quran are used to translate it as messages or signs or so. It means a tip or a hint that He's giving you a hack, as some people say. How you can get around the kind of errors and mistakes we make, where we fall short, what kind of tip we can use to overcome that. And what is important when the Quran tells us that the outfit that enhances divine attributes, that is the most attractive, because even the poorest person can wear that libasul taqwa, the outfit that could enhance their personality and character. Recently I was reading a statement by a priest who said, I was appointed the new pastor of a church in a different town. And I hadn't gone there before, so on the morning that I had to give my first sermon, I went to the church and I dressed up myself like a beggar, sat at the steps of the church to see the reaction of people. People came well dressed, all their finery or so, but the moment they saw me on the steps, they turned their faces, they walked away. Some even tried to push me. Some said, they said, get away from here, what are you doing here? This is not a place for you. You see, and then the service started and the person who was in charge of the church, the president or chairman or whatever it is, reached a point where he says, I have to introduce the new pastor. I haven't seen him yet, but I have introduced him that we do have a new pastor. He's coming here. And the beggar man walked into the church, stood up on the podium and said, I am your new pastor. And then he gave them a sermon on what you have been practicing is contrary to what has been taught in the New Testament, where Jesus said, and God said through Jesus, that as often when I'm naked, when I'm hungry, you feed me. When I'm naked, you clothe me. And people said, well, how is that? He said, when you do it to each other, that is how you do it to me. And this is the same teaching of Islam. That when we help each other, we are developing within us divine qualities of charity. If I receive something from someone, gives me a gift, or any kind of good, does a good deed to me, I will be grateful and thankful and so on. And these are the different attributes of Allah. But one important thing about outfits, garments and clothing is that it is said cleanliness is next to godliness. But it doesn't apply to our external garments as well. It applies to our external garments only. It applies as well to both types of outfits. That we have to have a clean heart and a clean mind, and that's the message of the Quran. It tells us how to purify ourselves. It gives us tips as to how to avoid the things that will make us angry and hatred and want to develop in hatred. And Quran says that, وَقَازِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, that is, you should control your anger. And it gives so many tips as to what our aspirations should be in life for our material welfare as well as our moral and spiritual welfare. So when the people compare the Quran with other scriptures and think the Quran is just like the Bible or the Vedas or whatever, it's not just another scripture. It's totally different in its approach and its purpose. Its purpose is to identify the human personality and to enhance it, to make it better. To help people, to warn people first of all, to inform them that if you follow guidance that is given to you, that you will make errors and mistakes in life, but if you take certain tips, you can overcome that. And if you don't, there will be consequences. That is not a punishment from God, it's a reaction to your own behavior, the way in which you function. You will find that it has an impact upon you, and it goes on to indicate this. By giving us the illustration of Adam. Adam and his mate. Some people use the word for mate as Eve, but that is not in the Quran, and it is a translation of words in elsewhere. But it is said that Adam and his mate was placed in a garden, and then the devil stripped them of their clothing, and they had to cover themselves with the leaves of the garden. You would find that similar story in other places, and unfortunately, when we transpose one story to another, we confuse the issue. If you look at the Old Testament, they tell you that Adam and, they said Eve were naked in the garden. And when Adam hid, when he ate the fruit, and he hid himself from God, how is that possible? I don't know, but he hid himself, and God looked for him and said, "Oh, Adam, where are you?" And he said, "I was hiding." And he said, "Who told you that you are?" He said, "I'm naked." And he said, "Who told you that?" He said, "Well, I ate from the fruit." And then he and his spouse Eve covered themselves with leaves of the garden. The interpretation has been, people have been trying to identify what leaf. Some say a fig leaf. The Quran does not give us this kind of story. It certainly doesn't say fig leaves. And what the Quran says here in this verse is that don't allow negative attractions to consume you, somewhat like what pushed out your two foreparents from a state of happiness, tearing them from them both their outfits to expose their nakedness. So according to the Quran, if you were to take it literally, Adam and Eve, or Adam and his spouse, did have garments. And the devil tore it, and it was then that they put the leaves, if you look at it from that way. So that the Quran is different from the other scriptures, which says that they were naked and created like that, and it's only after they ate of the forbidden fruit that they realized that they were naked. The Quran says no, that is not the issue. They were stripped of their garments and then they decided to cover up with the leaves of the garden. What is meant by all of this? We know the Quran, it says that we have given you certain verses which are quite plain and some which you need to understand and to draw references from. Their parables. So the Quran is indicating to us and pointing out to us that these tips are given from Allah for us to pay attention, and that the issue of Adam and his spouse represents really the human body and the soul, which is married to us. We are together. Once the moment you are born, your body and your soul are together. They are divorced or separated when you make that choice to focus only on the body and ignore the soul, or to focus on the soul and ignore the body, as some people do. They only focus on moral and spiritual development and don't look after the material things in life. I've heard many Muslims themselves say, you mustn't care for the dunya, the world. The Quran says, no, look after your dunya, look after your worldly affairs and your material existence. If you don't do that, how can you fast if you don't eat, if you don't get food? How can you pay zakat if you don't earn your income and so on? How can you give in charity if you don't earn wealth and so many other things so that is important for us to focus on our material existence and as well and excel in it, as well as to focus on our moral and spiritual existence, and also to excel in that. But then the Quran points out to us, what is the purpose of the garments that are given to us, the outfits that are given? It points out two things here: for you to cover, to conceal your nakedness, and for adornment. So that we cover the parts of our body that are exposed, that can expose us to shame, and we also enhance our own beauty. And if we do that with the attributes of Allah, you will find the Quran tells us good deeds cover up evil deeds. By doing good things, if your nakedness is in fact an expression for the lack of moral qualities. The lack of moral qualities. People who have anti-attributes of God. Instead of having love, they have hatred. Instead of charity, they are greedy. And so on. So this is what is called shirk in Islam. They are associated of things opposite to what Allah's attributes are. If you look at all the other attributes of Allah and you look at the opposite, people develop these kinds of attributes, and that is why they take these attributes for God without Allah. But they have to borrow those attributes from God in order to counteract it. They know what love is, and then they refuse to develop it, so they develop hatred and lack of respect for human life, and this is what is the cause of so much of murders and so much of crime and so much of ill will in the world today. So the Quran says, don't let the negative attractions, word for your negative attractions, I always translate the word shaitan, shayateen, the plural of it. And what the Quran has indicated to us is that you may have certain wrong tendencies, but you are induced, you are sort of tantalized by the attractions that are outside there. Whether it is music, whether it is dance, whether it is evil, whether it is money, whatever it may be. There are things, drugs and alcohol. These are things outside there, provided by, as the Quran says here, shaitan and his henchmen and his figureheads, as it were. Now those things itself, the alcohol, the drugs and the evil that is here, they don't exist like that and come and attack you. So the devil is not something that just flying in the air comes into your heart or your mind or comes into your house and does evil. That is not the concept. The concept the Quran points out to us, we have negative thoughts in our mind and there are negative influences outside. Right now in the United States, in England, there's a huge issue about so many young girls have been raped within the last couple of years, and there have been investigations, and there's call for the government to have an inquiry and they are stalling on that, and some people have said, well, bring down the government for this purpose or so. Because those people who rape, they have tendencies in their mind. But when the opportunity arises, that entices them to go further. So the Quran speaks of Iblis and Shaitan as working as cohorts. So the things outside there in itself, not the Quran says alcohol has good and bad, but it's the use to which and misuse that we put to it. So if we have certain negative thoughts in our minds, and they are negative influence outside of us, and they combine, then it causes us to perform what we call sin or crime or evil. So the indication given to us here is that the outfits that are given to us by Allah are for two purposes. One is to cover our nakedness, and secondly, to enhance our beauty, our adornment, our appearance. And we will see that with the divine qualities as well. That if a person is perhaps, as we say sometimes, a person may be angry, it's the human nature, but if they begin to control that and become loving, you will find that it really makes them an attractive person. I've often given this story where a daughter-in-law once was so annoyed with her mother-in-law that she decided that she wanted to get rid of her. As some people do. You read so many stories that people can't stand other people and they go to the extent of even committing murder, killing them. So she wanted to get rid of her mother-in-law, and she went to someone who said to get some advice as how to do that. And the wise old individual said, okay, I'll give you something to bring your mother-in-law's life to an end. And this medication I'm giving you, I want you to put a little bit every day for about 2 weeks. And at the end of the time, you will find that she's dead. So, but there's one condition. First of all, don't let anyone know. Well, even if they don't let anyone know, but treat your mother-in-law very nicely. We don't want anyone to suspect that you are doing this. So she started to adopt this approach and give the mother-in-law every day. She gives her meals, she puts this in it, and then she would speak to her nicely. The mother-in-law found it very strange and would talk back to her nicely. And went on like that for 2 weeks until she realized that, look, we are getting along so good. I don't want her to die now. We become such close friends. And so they went back to the wise old man and said, look, can you reverse this medication you're giving me so that I don't want her to die now. We love each other. She's dear to me and I'm dear to her. And the wise old man said, well, what I gave you was nothing really. I knew that the problem was between you is your attitude towards each other, hostility. Once you change that, you will become loving people. So it may be a story that is given, but it illustrates the kind of internal outfits that we need to provide in order to associate and communicate with people in the world in which we live in. And the Quran tells us, therefore, that if you don't develop these divine qualities, in other places in the Quran, dealing with this subject, it points out to us that there's a three-stage process that you go through when you do that which is wrong, whether it is lying, whether it is drinking, whether it is a crime, whatever it may be. First of all, you lose your peace of mind. It is innate in every human being. It is instinctive that we are good by nature. You look at children. They don't know what is good and what is bad, but they are good by nature. They develop any kind of wrong and ill feeling by means of the teachings that they get. So that is why we believe that every child is born sinless. We don't believe a person is born in sin who has inherited sin. You become sinful when you're full of sin, not when you don't have sin. So the Quran is indicating to us, it says that state of peace of mind that we have, that state of calmness, that state of, just living in joy and happiness, as you'll see as a baby now growing up, you'll be laughing, you'll be smiling, even if it is in hospital cry when it has pain and difficulty. But once a person loses that peace of mind, if you become frustrated, if you become depressed, if you become fed up, you lose your peace of mind and you don't know what you're doing now. And you see so many people when they get angry, they're quarreling with their spouse, their children, their friends, their neighbors, the police, whoever it is. They begin to argue and it increases, they begin to shout louder and louder, and they lose their peace of mind, and then they have no self-control. So that's one thing where you anger your own self with your hostility towards other people, and then you do something, you get caught. Once you get caught now, you begin to think differently. The problem hasn't been solved, but you have a bigger problem now. You have to pay in court, or you have to pay compensation for breaking the person's wall, or for doing something, or doing damage to them, or it has caused some kind of injury to them, and you can't do anything, but you regret, why did I have to go so far? We see it so many times that people say, this is not like me. If I use an abusive remark about women or men or people or so, or race or religion, then a person will come out and say, I apologize. I didn't mean it. That was not me. That is not, who is that? You said it. And then you're saying, this is not me. This is not who I am. Those are common expressions that people, when they are caught in doing the wrong thing, and it's pointed out to them, especially in the media, and especially when it is so widespread now on social media, they begin to defend themselves when they are caught, feeling so much shame and embarrassed. And that's what the Quran says. That kind of nakedness, your real personality is coming out, but you're trying to cover it up. And that is what is meant by the leaves of the garden. The leaves of the garden means that when human beings do something wrong, they cover up themselves with excuses. They make all kinds of excuses. And the reason why the Quran uses the metaphor of leaves of the garden, not leaves of the tree, but leaves of the garden, is that a leaf cannot cover your nakedness, even if it is a fig leaf. In that case of Adam and Eve, they had no thread and no needle, or how would they sew it? Even they didn't know how to tie it around the way, and even in itself it will fall down. It cannot stand up, or it will dry. They have to be constantly, and then it was two of them, Adam and his wife. What need was there for them to have that kind of covering? So the Quran is not telling us here about some physical occurrence that happened. It's giving us a parable and says leaves will not stand up, it will not cover you, and it will not stand up. It will always fall. It will. Similarly, when you do something wrong and you make an excuses, it just doesn't cover the facts. And it will not stand up. You will be exposed and constantly exposed, because it will be repeated again and again. You are that kind of person, no matter how much you deny it and say, I am not such a person. And then, of course, there are three stages, as I said. You lose your peace of mind when you do something. That makes it repeatable. Because if you do it and you get away, you feel you could do it again. But at some point when you're caught, now you realize that, look, I should not have been doing that in the first place. And then, of course, if you suffer consequences of punishment, you lose your job, you lose your status, you lose your family, whatever it is, but there are a lot of losses. Punishment doesn't necessarily mean here you go to jail or you're given a fine, but your own status in the community and society is lowered, and people are mocking you, laughing you, and that is someone once said, there is a great punishment in being a slave. Not only in having the chains around you, but when you're walking and people are looking at you and saying, that's a slave. That's if a person is poor, one thing they're suffering, but when somebody has looked down upon them and say, you are no good, you are poor, you are dirty, get away from me, that hurts them probably even more than the fact that they have nothing to wear or nothing to eat. So that punishment is there when we adopt an attitude of we are caught now and we suffer the consequences of that. And so the Quran, when it speaks here, it says that our foreparents were pushed out of the state of happiness, what is called Jannah. They were removed, وَأَخْرَجَ مِنْهُمَا Jannah. The Quran says, it says here, Ya Bani Adam, Kama akhraja abwaykum min al-Jannah. That in a way in which your foreparents were pushed out of Jannah. So we are pushed out a state of happiness. We are ripped out of it. We are, the word used word used here is we are taken out of the state of Jannah, really meaning with greater force. Just as a person, if they have on garments, you rip it off them, they become naked. Similarly, when we are in a state of joy and happiness, and then somebody comes and interferes with that, They throw a hurtful word or bad word, or they do something to you, and you lose that peace of mind. You're sitting quite comfortably in your home, your porch, in your hammock, or whatever it may be, in your car, and then someone comes up on you with road rage, or some neighbor comes and pelts you, or something happens, and that peace of mind that you're enjoying suddenly becomes interfered with, and you begin to react. And so the Quran says, when you do that, you will find that you move out of that state. Now you go to another state in which you are no longer controlling yourself, but you are the qualities that you have within you of patience and tolerance and understanding and ability to communicate in a nice way. All of these things go out of the door. You're stripped of it, and you become a hostile, boisterous person, begin to curse, begin to react, begin to want to retaliate, and all of these things. So the Quran is a book that deals with excuse me, the development of the human personality and the challenges that we have to face. And so it is important for us to appreciate the guidelines that are given to us in the Quran, the tips that are there to help us to be able to deal on a personal level with any issue that may arise in life that could take us away from being true servants of Allah and developing His attributes within ourselves and our personality. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikr al-hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun kareem malikun barrun rahufur rahim. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa may yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma ansur man nasara din Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam waj'alna minhum. Allahumma aghzul man khazala dina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa la tajalna minhum. Inna Allaha ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i zil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'izukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Uzkurullaha yazkurkum wad'uhu yastajib lakum wa la zikrullahi ala akbar.
Allahu Akbar, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة